Quantum Consciousness and New Technology. The panel aims to understand quantum consciousness, its emergence, unique path, and contextual difference in the contemporary times. Now, I invite Professor Syed, sir, to introduce the concept note for this session.
All right, so a very warm welcome to all of you. It's a privilege to be here, and we have the title of our thing is as Quantum Consciousness Framework and New Technology in Social Sciences and Feminist Discourses. So we have a lot to discuss into this, and I hope our panelists stick to their time. From quantum framework and complexity framework, there are a lot of things, and the emerging technology, innovation adoption, innovation diffusion. Several examples are there. Back in the history, we have whale hunting just for oil, because we haven't discovered petroleum. Later on, it became a market. Finally, an alternative came in the name of plastic. Then people have adopted plastic. Now we have again a feedback loop that is taking us towards the other end, which is again a problem. Problem in marine system, problem in human, that is plastic in human system, right? So that's how we are adopting technologies. So it goes into a positive feedback loop, it goes into a negative feedback loop. So Professor Patra would be discussing more about this from quantum perspective, and then we have Professor Savita, and then Satakshi Malviya, and then Professor Manindra Nath Thakur, Varun, and Rakesh Ranjan. So may I request Professor Patra and Professor Savita to initiate the discussions?
So here's a brief introduction of our panelists. The chair of the panel is Professor Syed Shariq Husain, whose research work is focused on studies of data-driven complex socio-economic system using interdisciplinary techniques and data science approaches. He currently teaches at Jindal University. Our panelists include Professor Savita Singh, who is a distinct feminist poet and a social theorist. She is the founding director and professor of School of Gender and Development Studies, IGNOU. She has written extensively on Indian modernity and feminism. Dr. Sudip Patra is a professor at Jindal University. His research work lies in quantum-like modeling in cognitive science, or particularly in decision theory. Satakshi Malviya is a PhD candidate at University of Delhi.
Not really.
Professor Manindra Nath Thakur is an associate professor at the Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. His area of interest include political ideas in Indian intellectual traditions, radical movements in India, and modern Indian political thought. Dr. Varun Wighal is currently assistant professor at St. Joseph University, Bengaluru. Rakesh Ranjan is a PhD candidate at CPS JNU. Our discussant for today is Professor Harish S. Wankhede, who is assistant professor at Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. I now hand over to our panelists.
So, before Sudip start, I'll just read the concept note, which is like social realities, fast-changing scientific and technological surface is difficult to fathom. So, understanding from quantum consciousness, its emergence, unique path, and contextual differences may make it somewhat comprehensible. A clear shift from a deterministic, Newtonian, and reductionist positivistic world of science to theories of post-empiricism, quantum interdeterminism, and a critical creative word that opens the horizon of science is reflected in the acceptance of a constantly expanding cosmos open to human weaving and understanding. Simultaneously, though, the power of technology realized and practiced through panopticon surveillance has transitioned into a post-surveillance phase of its development. How we make sense of these occurrences from the perspective of the Indian scientific tradition, wisdom thinking, and its knowledge system is also a question that may produce a different answer in its new richness. So, with that, I'll invite Professor Patra to initiate this.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible. Okay. Yeah. So it's a great pleasure to be here and with my dear friend Shariq, and certainly with Professor Savita and Professor Manindra. So we have been discussing on these areas for some time. So in a way, our paper would like to take a different turn. So we would like to present a different world view which is coming up from different modern scientific frameworks. And that is where we work, so Shariq, myself, and we. So I mainly work in a field called as quantum-like framework, which is an interface between quantum physics and decision science and its applications in social sciences. And Shariq is very much into complexity science, and there are synergies between them also. And then certainly, as Shariq has already mentioned, we'll be also mentioning a bit about Indian wisdom thinking and feminist philosophies, of course, where I will request Savita ji to continue, and how they can enrich modern scientific frameworks. Now, it is interesting to see that even after, say, 100 years of the advent of quantum mechanics, which by quantum mechanics I mean 1925 as the watershed year. Earlier to 1925, there was also another brief period, which we can call as old quantum theory or quantum physics in some sense, old quantum physics, where many Indian scientists also did a splendid job. For example, we all know about Professor Satyendra Nath Bose writing to Albert Einstein about quantum statistics. So those things were happening. But in 1925-26, more technically, brilliant, interesting papers started coming up. And those papers were actually based on necessity rather than any kind of axiomatic thinking, I should say, because as it is well known now that Newtonian physics, classical physics, was not possible to give answers to many experimental evidence which was coming up. Black body radiation to photoelectric effect, there are many things. And based on that, very young minds, I should say, which and certainly guided by Professor Niels Bohr, one of the founding fathers of so-called Copenhagen camp of quantum mechanics, those papers started coming up. Heisenberg, Schrödinger, Pauli, Max Born, and so on. Now, the interesting thing is, as we have found, that these great minds or young minds at that time, Schrödinger was a bit older than the others, they were not simply technocrats, as we find nowadays. Unfortunately, many scientists might have taken that path. They were also very deeply philosophical minded, and they were raising some interesting philosophical questions. What were those philosophical questions? That is our starting point. Now, they were in a way challenging the Newtonian, so-called Newtonian idea of science, which was about determinism, mainly about determinism. Now, in a particular deterministic universe, what we see is that there is a particular prescription. If you follow that particular prescription, then it is possible in principle to kind of understand or predict all the future as well as the past events ditto. So there is no scope of uncertainty there. There is no scope of creativity there in this way. Now, yes, certainly uncertainty can be introduced in classical physics, but that can only be done through ignorance uncertainty. Or in other words, this shows that the view is ontological realist view, that there is only one single world outside there, and there is only one particular trajectory that that particular world can take. But due to my ignorance, I do not know exactly what trajectory, and therefore I am coming up with kind of probability models, or I am trying to kind of describe that with probabilities. Now, these probabilities are well known as so-called Bayesian probabilities. So these probabilities are based on my ignorance as an experimenter rather than the ontological feature of the world. Now, this is the main point which quantum physics was challenging. Quantum physics was trying to say that, well, the world itself is, in the words of Richard Feynman, whimsical. So nature herself is whimsical. Or in other words, there is some kind of ontological indeterminacy in the world, which is simply not possible for us to tame. So this whole idea of dominance and taming and controlling, that was challenged from the beginning by quantum philosophy. Apart from this, there were two other most important features which always come back in our own research in human decision making. One is contextuality and the other one is non-locality. So you see that quantum physics was the first one to challenge another very important feature of Newtonian science, for the better want of a word, and this particular feature was contextual emergence. So in earlier classical physics, all the experimental results or all the observations that you have, they were all in a way out there. So it was already predefined and pre-existing, and what as an experimenter you can do, you can just carefully collect the same information which is out there. There is no creation of new information when you are trying to make any experimental observation. Now quantum physics put contextuality into the heart of it. According to contextuality, there is no well-defined notion of non-contextual objective truth. Or in other words, all the experimental results, even if they seem to be very repetitive and so on, they are actually a creation of context. And the context means that where you cannot throw away the observer. Now, certainly, by observer, I do not necessarily mean conscious observer. It can be any kind of interaction. People have always tried to move away from conscious observers in standard science. So it can be, the context is actually a kind of, one may have said, is a kind of like a more inseparable whole, in the words of Niels Bohr, between the system to be measured and the atmosphere. So without that context, no truth, no observation, no values are defined. And that itself is a very big shock. It was such a big shock that great minds like Albert Einstein and others could not really digest this. And we know that there is a long battle between Einstein and Niels Bohr on these interpretations. Another very important feature which came out was non-locality. Now you see that again, standard science, whatever we do, is very much influenced by the concept of locality. Or in other words, there cannot be non-local interactions. So if only exception was Newton's own gravitational formula, where if you do something to one particle, then the gravitational force will be immediately affected the other particle. Now, when Newton was asked that what is the reason behind this, Newton candidly said that hypothesis non fingo. I don't frame any hypothesis for that, I don't know. But he was very embarrassed. Himself, he was very embarrassed. So you can read his original writings that he was saying that no, this is against locality principle, and I think that there is some big mistake there. Now, very interestingly, quantum mechanics put non-locality again into the debate. And we know that there are many interesting features of non-locality. Due to brevity of time, we won't be going into that. But one particular feature which has been very, very well described, and now technologies have been harnessing that quite well, that is entanglement. So entanglement is a kind of non-locality, not the only non-locality, where you have some kind of particles which can be created in pairs from a common source, and then you send the particles to two laboratories, for example, which are so-called space-like separated, so that they cannot influence each other when measurements are happening. Even in that kind of a scenario, these particles are often called as entangled particles. And when you measure one particular property on one particle, the corresponding property of the other particle is immediately known to the experimenter. Now, this seems to violate this locality principle, and there is still a very, very deep ongoing debate going on in entanglement philosophy. Now, the point that what we would like to mention here is that all these features, whether indeterminacy, ontic indeterminacy rather than Bayesian, or contextuality or non-locality, they have now been harnessed by technologies too. So technologies cannot really avoid these particular things. All this great hype about, say, quantum computing and quantum computers, they are all based on these features. So whether we are able to kind of actualize that in reality at a large scale, that's a different question. But they are all based on these particular things. So that is one particular angle that we want to come in. Now the second point is that how that is relevant for social science. So because this is very much natural science philosophy as it started. Now very interestingly, there where our works come in, both Shariq and mine, that we see that this kind of interesting philosophical and mathematical frameworks can be extended to various interesting areas of decision science. And in that way, it can also be extended to, say, economics, finance, and other areas. There is a particular area which is growing very strong, and that is where we do research, which is known as quantum-like framework. So it is not saying that, it is not taking any reductionist approach. It is not saying that human brain is quantum physical, as Sir Roger Penrose, Stuart Hameroff, and others, they have taken this route. We are saying that no, we are agnostic about it, but there are various interesting features of decision making which cannot be explained by deterministic framework, which cannot be explained by the so-called, Bayesian statistical framework. So in decision making also, there is deep contextuality. Contextuality in decision making is a very important area which is coming up, and there is a very dense literature in that. So from that perspective also, it seems that backed with a lot of data and experiments, etc. So it's very, very kind of based on empirical experiments also. So that from that perspective also, these philosophies would matter a lot. Then I come back to two more points, and then I request Professor Savita to take forward. One point is what some of my collaborators are working on, like Stuart Kaufman and others. It is often known as biocosmology view. This particular view is a very interesting view which shows that the biosphere that we live in, or say even social ecology that we live in, that is constantly evolving. Now, a constantly evolving biosphere is very, very different from, say, standard classical mechanical deterministic worldview. Because in technical terms, the configuration space in which you do your scientific modeling, that itself is indefinite, that itself is indeterminate, that itself is evolving. So we need to, in a way, move away from standard scientific understanding to understand our life evolution. That is a huge, huge shock to many scientists, and therefore alternative formulas have been proposed. I can get into that later on. Then finally, Indian wisdom thinking, what Professor Manindra and we have been deliberating for some time, that there may be some interesting insights we can draw from Indian wisdom thinking which can enrich this kind of philosophies more. Because Indian wisdom thinking in many cases, for example, one particular is Jain philosophy, which is not based on typical binary thinking. It is not based on typical deterministic logic. So with one of my senior co-author, Professor Partha Ghosh, a great scientist in India, we have proposed a framework where there are like 3 truth values to a particular contextual proposition: true, false, and avakyam. And avakyam is unmanifest. Unmanifest is analogous to superposition in quantum mechanics, need not to be same. But if that is also taken as to be a valid judgment or valid truth position, then many more kind of combinations of true, false, and avakyam can come up. And that can give rise to a new kind of like a creative view of the universe with unmanifest. Now that leads me to creativity and feminist philosophies and how that can be integrated to mainstream science. So I will request Professor Savita to highlight on that a bit.
How many minutes?
That's all right. 13 minutes.
Pardon?
13 minutes.
I have 13 minutes.
No.
We're done with your time.
So actually, I'm done with our time. So what am I supposed to say? Building on what Sudip has just said, I'll give you just a sketch as to where we are as feminists and our theory. The thing is that from the last session, I just wanted to bring you back so that I can situate my deliberation here. Is that while quantum physics was developing, and a certain notion of indeterminacy had become very apparent even to the natural scientists, and Newtonian world view, mechanical view, deterministic view was receding because it was challenged time and again by new experiments and new interaction with other human beings in the universe. It was becoming very clear that atom structure was different. Atom, because it's the ontological, it is the essence of Western ontology, frankly speaking, metaphysics as Heidegger calls it. That atom itself was far more complex than what it was considered to be. That complexity opened up the world for indeterminacy more work, more reflection. And Heidegger himself had said in his second part of his Being and Time, which he called Time and Being, in which he said that we actually have to restart the entire thing. The project of Western metaphysics has gone on a illusory wrong path. And unless we do it, we will not be able to save the world, he said. The Europeanization of the earth will simply bring in collapse. The collapse theory is also there in quantum, as you know. So, re-beginning, and how Marcuse, because Marcuse is being also talked about in the last thing. Marcuse said that since we are all creative, there is a drive in us which is erotic, which is highly creative and nurturing. I mean, human beings get survival instinct from this particular drive. Otherwise, the thanatotic drive is death. It's a death drive. We can all simply die. We will be we'll accept our death happily, thinking that we are doing great job. So, Caroline Merchant wrote a very important book, and I want to start with her only, called Death of Nature, where she said that all the science that has developed in the western part of the world, particularly in natural philosophy, positivism, Newtonianism, all of this is going to lead to the death of nature. And because death of nature will not be a single thing in itself, it will inevitably mean death of everything, meaning to say that there is an integral relationship between nature and humans and other beings. That was a path-breaking work. And then in the epistemology, right? Okay, all right. In the epistemology, feminist epistemology, we have come to a position which we call new materialism. Now, this new materialism is a philosophy which is talking about creative recreation of humanism. Not, it's like going even beyond postmodernism. There is a hope in recreating ourselves because that kind of creative impulse is within us. So, I don't have time to explain all of these things. The thing is that Karen Barad, who is the most important quantum physicist, feminist quantum physicist, who is working on two notions. One is called integral humanism. Even Aurobindo talks about it in our philosophy. And the other one, she's talking about realist essentialism.
Relational agency.
Relational essentialism, meaning again that we can recreate our agency by attributing the same right, the same view to other creatures also. We are not the single agents. All other creatures also have agency. They have a project of their lives. Even an ant, the smallest creature, survives in this universe, and nature takes care of it. So these two views, with Donna Haraway completely resituating our feminist knowledge, which is called situated epistemology. All of this is now within feminism. Quantum physics is flourishing in real terms. So just to end the whole thing, the erotic drive Marcuse calls is feminism, is feminist drive. And that is why he says our future is not socialist feminist, but feminist socialism. Thank you.
So thank you, Professor Sudip and Professor Savita. I'll just add one more line onto that, and Professor Savita say. So we had a course related with complexity and ethics, in which we have built upon the idea of Catherine Gilligan, Catherine Larriel, Carroll, and so on biocentrism, and resorted on the book of Yet Another Voice. And we have introduced the concept of ethics of care, solidarity, and partnership to have a positive feedback loop that may set the civilization into a positive way, right? I have mentioned two different examples, one plastic, other whaling, and there are so many innumerous examples that can set the feedback loop into a negative direction. That's why I wanted to mention these things, because these are constructive and setting up the feedback loop into a positive direction. We say this path dependency in complexity notion, and Sudip Patra may also shed light onto that, how these transformation, these path dependencies can lead to the emergence. Just like our ideas are being self-organized, and later on at the end of this seminar, they will emerge in some form of literature and a framework. So with this word, I will request Professor Manindra Thakur and okay, so
if I may just interrupt, every panelist is supposed to complete in 10 minutes. First bell will go at 10 minutes, and then there will be 2 more minutes to wrap it up. So 12 minutes, please, I urge you.
Your turn.
All right. So, should we start?
Put it there. Varun or you? Me and then you. Okay.
All right. So don't get afraid by seeing that 3 speakers are there. I will not take any time except saying that we are working on this project now, looking at the acceptance of Penrose's thesis about quantum mind that has emerged in the last 6 months' time. It looks like that we are going to have a new kind of situation which might mark an ontic mutation of the world. And in that, what kind of new issues will be there, we are trying to trace. And one of the issues that we want to pick up is cognitive freedom. And we want to respond to that from Indian intellectual tradition. And of course, the question always remains, can Asians think? And I hope they have already thought a lot. So maybe there are resources there from where we can draw something to challenge the situation that we are facing today. And not only in terms of resolving the crisis, but also in terms of understanding the crisis. So I will hand over to Varun, and Varun and Rakesh will make main presentations. So we have written the paper together. The written paper is available. Thank you.
So as very precisely narrated by Professor Thakur, that our task is to understand the dynamics of 4th industrial revolution. And when I say 4th industrial revolution, it incorporates this idea of quantum computing. And now we have moved beyond genetic coding and all, and now this is the era of quantum computing. So in this light of 4th industrial revolution, we are trying to understand the cognitive challenges that the humanity will face. And one of the most pressing challenge is the idea of cognitive freedom. So do we have this cognitive freedom? For instance, if I start with a very important text that is recently written by a very prominent biologist named Robert Sapolsky. The text is Determinism and the Life Without Free Will. So there is sort of some kind of a consensus that got built up, especially in biology, that we do not have free will. And if we do not have of course, free will is a very loaded term. That is also, it needs to be very taken care of. That free will is a loaded term. But if we do not have free will, what are the implications it has on human condition? What are the implications it has on social? Now, the point is that with the advancement in quantum mechanics, with the advancement in the metaphysics and philosophy of quantum mechanics, we are somehow at the crossroad. So jury is still out. Do we have that free will or not? But what insights are now we getting, especially with the quantum turn, is that there is a possibility that some kind of mechanism is there which somehow can have some idea of agency and free will, not just to humans but to other agents also. So and that mechanism is based on this idea of Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff. It's called orchestrated objective reduction theory. And there are contemporary global quantum physics scholars who are now sort of accepting this premise. Recently, they have got some evidence that this theory can make some sense, that our brain could be not like classical computer, but it could be like a quantum computer, which means that it follows the laws of quantum mechanics, which are based on non-determinacy, non-locality, and uncertainty and contextuality. And if this carries some weight, what are the implications? What are the cognitive challenges on the question of cognitive freedom and free will? And for instance, the very prominent scientists in Google, who works in Google, Harmut Nguyen and Christoph Koch, they are now accepting this idea that, probably we are quantum computers. Our brain is a quantum, mechanical system. And the laws that it follows is qubits, which is non-algorithmic. And again, it is based on this idea of non-computationality, that computationality, computability is not something that produces consciousness. Rather, it is some sort of quantum quantum bizarre and weirdness in that sense. So in that context, we are trying to understand what are the challenges on the question of freedom, on the question of free will, and also, what could be the insights, what insights these mechanisms and these philosophies can provide us to understand some of the eccentric, some of the idiosyncratic phenomena. For instance, when you talk about this debate between free will, do we have free will or not, we tend to, can associate these questions with other, some kind of eccentric phenomena like telepathy, like placebo effect, like extrasensory perception. For instance, placebo effect, all of you know what placebo is, that this impact that mind has on the materiality. Homeopathy, some people argue that is based on placebo. So is there a reality which takes consciousness seriously in the light of the challenges that biological determinism has placed before us? And now the question is that what insights do Indian philosophical tradition and Indian intellectual tradition can provide us in understanding the complexities of these challenges, and also in providing us with some kind of technique and modeling, probably technique and modeling of self-reflexivity. This idea that, there is something, there is this tremendous capacity within us that we can be conscious of our own consciousness. If that is true, then in that context, what insights do Indian tradition provide us? And to elaborate on that, I would request my colleague Rakesh to sort of elaborate on the Indian intellectual part. Thank you.
Hello, so good afternoon to all of you. So our esteemed panelists have basically tried to articulate the problem that is lying, and they have also tried to preempt the problem and preempt the challenges that could lie before us, and the speculative strong AI would come, and in that sense. But then as they were talking about Indian intellectual traditions and Indian wisdom, so one of the texts like Cain Upanishad says that Yashya matam tasya matam. Matam yasana vedasa. One who has not known, then that should be known. And one who has known, he has got more to know. Right? So, on that note, I would like to start with the question that Varun passed to me, that are there any resources available in Indian intellectual traditions which could have got the capacity to uplift and upgrade human consciousness to a level where the sense of cognitive freedom and the sense of cognitive autonomy could be gained by human, and then we could meet with the challenges of cognition, meet with the challenge of cognitive manipulation as it is being stipulated. So there are many kind of texts and many kind of technologies of self that are available in different schools of Indian philosophy. Like Vigyan Bhairav Tantra comes from Kashmir Saivism, that talks about 112 ways of epistemic frameworks to access the ontology of consciousness, the third layer of consciousness that lies beyond the ontic layers of body and mind. Then there are texts in other traditions. What I will be doing right now, that I am taking one method from one text, and through it I like to elaborate that how it could uplift human consciousness. So the text is Drig Drish Vivekam. That text is a Vedantic text that is being authored by Adi Shankaracharya, though it is also attributed to Vidyaranya Swami because the author is not known. As in Indian tradition, only the ideas are needed to be known more. That's why it has been done in that sense. So this basically has got three terms. Drig, that is the seer, who is seeing. Drish, that is the seen. And Vivek is knowing. Vivek is discerning. Vivek is discriminating between what is sar and what is asar, what is real and what is unreal. And this text starts with the presumption or hypothesis that there is an autonomous domain of consciousness. It is not an epiphenomenon. It has got an independence of its own. And human beings have got the capacity, the kind of cognitive capacity to access that domain of consciousness. It starts with that frame. So
I would be doing two things. First, at the level of experiential epistemology, how it talks about the method, and then through the level of Gyan Marg, how we could understand that. So it talks about in sense of two things that we start looking from outside. The verse is, with closed eyes, see the inner being within you. So it says that when the world is the seer and human body is the seen, when the world is the seen and human eyes or human body is the seer, then when we go deeper, then human body itself can become the seen. It can become the sense of, it can become the site of investigation, and human mind becomes the seer at that point of time. Then we once again, if we try to go deeper, then human mind itself becomes the scene. The thoughts that are going on in human mind, the different kind of sensations that are coming at the level of chit, and the inner mind becomes the seer. So this is the meditative way that it talks about. And in this process, finally going deeper and deeper, and as the level of cognition keeps interpenetrating into the different layers of our reality and existence, one reaches to that layer of consciousness, the third layer of ontology, what like Astavakra Gita talks about being Vishsakshi, the witness of the cosmic witness of the state, or Bhagavad Gita talks in terms of going to the avastha of Trigunatit, being beyond the three gunas, Satraj and Tam gunas. So different kind of words have been used, but that remains the substrate of all the realities that could be seen and unseen. That is autonomous domain, but it remains the base of all the other kind of layers and that we are talking about. And this thing can also be understood through the process of knowledge and Gyan Marg, because whenever we see anything in this world, this text talks about that it crosses through four different stages: Sangya, Vigyan, Samvedana, and Sanskar. If you hear any voice, or if you are seeing any person, that particular thing is Sangya, that something is there. Then Vigyan is who is saying, who is that person, from where that voice is coming. That is the second level Vigyan. These all things happen within nanoseconds within our mind. The third is Samvedana, that is sensations. That whatever sensation is related to that voice or that person, according to our conditioning, our mind that has happened till today, that starts running on our body and our human mind basically. It may be the sensations of pleasure, if we have got good relationship with that person. It may be the sensations of pain and agony, if we have got some kind of repulsion with that person. There are many kind of sensations that keep moving on human body. That is sensation. And the fourth part is sanskar. If we have got the identification, if we identify and we attach with those sensations, that become the part of our existence, and that comes on our chitta. And that forms the part. This method says that if we are in a state of Sakshi Bhav, if we are just in a state of witnessing, what J. Krishnamurti talks about in terms of choiceless awareness, we are just aware, we are not identifying ourselves with those sensations, then the very nature of the sensations is appearance and disappearance, appearance and disappearance. Only when we identify with those sensations, then they get solidified to our chitta. So if we just remain in a state of witness, Sakshi Bhav that this text talks about and different philosophers talks about, then those sanskars and sensations start losing their potency. And once they start losing their potency, the process of erasing those sanskars from our chitta and our inner layer of mind starts happening. And this way we start going deeper and deeper into the level of into the level of cognitive consciousness and cognitive thinking. And human beings have got the capacity to go to that level where they could attain cognitive autonomy and cognitive freedom. So that third layer of ontology is something which people and human beings in the wake of the crisis that is going on, they should try to access it. And I coin it in terms of Triveni Sangam of consciousness. As the Sangam we know, where Ganga, Yamuna and Saraswati come and confluence with each other. Here Sat, Chit and Anand, theorized in terms of ontology, epistemology and axiology, the question of ethics, that AI is completely missing. These three come together, and that level of consciousness, if we get, and we can get, then from that springboard of consciousness, if ethical dispositions of idea would come, if our cognitive consciousness would come, then I guess that in the wake when this all the debates of Penrose and Kaufman model seems to be a possibility, and the rapid challenges of AI is there. So at one level, we could uplift and upgrade our human consciousness to that level of cognitive autonomy, and at the second level, we could ensure that the expansion and integration of AI happens with human value and human dignity. That is the way I want to say.
Basically, the experiment that we have tried doing in this paper is that can we have a dialogue across tradition? For instance, that there is lack of communication when it comes to the advancement that is happening in philosophy of science and philosophy of social science. West has progressed. Alexander Wendt has written this book, Quantum Mind in Social Science. International relation theory, political theory is now changed. What is Indian theory doing in the light of these changes? And can we take some insights from our own intellectual philosophical corpus? And can we have a dialogue? That is what the purpose of the paper was. So thank you.
Done, yeah.
All right, thank you for the wonderful session. All right, so thank you for the wonderful session. I think our thoughts are really going to self-organize, and now let's see for the emergence. So do we have any questions?
There's another presenter.
There's another? One more? Okay. So I request Satakshi to please.
A very good afternoon to one and all present here, and it's my honor to sit with so many senior panelists. Not in terms of age, but in terms of experience and knowledge. So I'm PhD scholar from Delhi University. So this paper, post-panoptic shift, the changing nature of school surveillance in India in the digital age. This is the study this is the 3 months ethnographic study which I did in Delhi schools. And can we move to the next slide? So this is the detail about that. 10 schools has been selected from Southeast and Southwest Delhi, pre-primary, primary, secondary and senior secondary. And the sample size is 100 students, 100 teachers and 100 non-teaching staff, that is administrative staff and the guards and the cleaning crew. So the paper is based on normal interviews and the observational method, non-participatory, especially sitting at the back side of the class and just observing what's going on in the class. So what my paper aim here, I tried to, like, for example, in international relation, we have seen Thomas Kuhn has said that there is a paradigm shift. So similarly, in the surveillance theories, it is said that there is a shift from panoptic theories of surveillance to post-panoptic theories. Can we move to the next slide? More one again. So if you have seen that Foucault's concept, Jeremy Bentham concept of panopticon has been interpreted by Foucault, and Foucault has criticized and brought new insights in that, and he said that it is a kind of surveillance. So can we move to the fourth slide? Fourth. Yes. So this is what Jeremy Bentham has described, and Foucault talks about that. In this structure, if you notice, the gaze is unidirectional. So in that tower in the middle, I will just briefly discuss it, and then I'll move to what I did in my paper. So it works on the principle of power should be visible. Inmate always have this consciousness that there is central tower in front of them from where he is spied, and unverifiable inmates never gets to know that when they are being watched. So the similar thing I tried to see in the schools also. The gaze of the inspector is unidirectional, and the counter surveillance by the inmates is not possible. There exists a strict top-down hierarchy between the watcher and the watched. These are the points related to the panopticon theories. Alright, so it is based on the centralized architecture, as you can see, and the main function here is monitoring the inmates. The aim is to normalize and internalize the discipline in inmates alter their behavior through soul training so that they become docile bodies who loses the capacity and authority to resist. So what I try to do is I try to simply see this kind of panopticon surveillance in the schools. And if we can move to the next slide. So the shift is that with the advancement of technology, what has happened is the theory of panopticon, like just sticking to the structure, it is not possible because now we have CCTV cameras, other kind of new technologies, biometric systems, etc. So there are a set of surveillance theorists who have challenged this thing, and they look forward a call for post-panoptic surveillance theories. So in that, if you can see the second point, they have tried to criticize Foucault also, and they tried to build upon the theories of Foucault. So we have omnicon and polyopticon. So there were many theories related to that. So this shift is termed as a shift from panopticon surveillance, which is architectural based, unidirectional, internalizing the discipline, to a post-panopticon which is related to the new technologies, the coming of new technologies, and taking the challenges that what new technologies are bringing. So Roy Boyne, who argues to adopt post-panoptic lenses to carry forward the research, and as Somik in the previous panel, he has discussed Deleuze in detailed form regarding the control societies. So now the shift is from discipline to control, that how in the schools a shift we can mark from discipline to control. So that I try to do in my paper. So the last thing is surveillant assemblage. So this term is marked by, if we move to the next slides. Yeah, this one. So this term is marked by Haggerty and Erickson. Haggerty and Erickson. So they try to use the Deleuze and Guattari's concept of rhizomes. And next slide. So if you see the structure of rhizome, it's very in the form of networks. So if you see if you just imagine that we all have mobile phones, laptops, and we have this kind of networking structure where our data is flowing. So they are giving this, taking the concept of Deleuze and Guattari of rhizomes, and they are trying to show that now the human bodies have become the data bodies. All right. So data bodies can support the targeted surveillance. The previous slide, please. So in this data age, this assemblage operates by abstracting human bodies from their territorial settings and separating them into a series of discrete flows. So the gaze becomes the multidimensional. There is no hierarchy. Anybody can have a track on anybody with the use of their data. All right. Surveillance in surveillance is omnipresent. Visibility is powerful. Human body turns into digital data. What is observed is recorded, stored, and used. Absence of any neat hierarchy between watcher and the watched, and aim is to control rather than to internalize discipline. Leon argues, so we got in the post-panoptic surveillance theory, in the post-panoptic paradigm, we got a new theory for the new definition of surveillance that David Leon says that Leon argues that the specific type of surveillance that is contemporarily practiced can be defined as the collection and processing of personal data or information for the purpose of care or control, to influence or manage persons and populations, and here power relations are intrinsic to surveillance processes. So let's move to my paper. So I had there were several responses, but I would like to share some. So there were faculty who were mainly in the primary and secondary schools. So they were working there for 20 years, and they have seen this transformation when there was no cameras, and then the cameras were initiated as the non-mandatory guidelines by the Delhi government. Or we can say the Department of School Education and Literacy. So what happened there is it was non-mandatory. what faculty has said is previously they have the teachers and the guards used to patrol. So it's the architecture is like that the gaze is unidirectional. They just patrol around the corridors. They look, they make sure that whether the children are in the class or not, students are in the class or not, teachers are taking classes or not. But with the introduction of CCTV cameras, this structure has changed. And then the two, I will just move to a very important point. One more response from the primary school. A female teacher says that before the cameras, when we used to teach the kids, we used to make funny expressions. We try to make them learn in a very entertaining way. But after the cameras, we become self-conscious that how can we act funny or do like that. And specifically when they got to know that the videos are also recorded. So let me tell you one more thing, that after 2017, what happened was the crimes in the schools, murders and ragging and etc. was on peak. So Delhi government decided to initiate the installment of 1.2 lakh cameras in school. That simply means that 150 to 200 cameras in all the schools of Delhi. That is 1041 schools. So previously there were only cameras on entry gates and or the vulnerable locations, but now in each and every classrooms. And in the COVID period, the two important points which I would like to highlight is that during the COVID-19, there was a clear-cut shift to the digital education because students were at home, teachers were at home. So the guidelines by the government, Delhi government, was to make use of this YouTube session or the live session, interactive voice responses, and they have also tried to make a deal with Khan Academy to deliver the lectures on maths especially for class 9 to 12th. But actually what happened in the practice was the teachers told that to ease the communication thing, they actually use WhatsApp and Google Meet. And in Google Meet also, one of the member from the administrative body used to be present in the Google Meet, and they make sure whether the teacher is taking class or not. So the lectures sometimes are being recorded. Teachers become conscious that how and what that data will be used if it might use against them in the later phase. So this is something we can see in panoptic model. And the last point I want to add here is the issue of live feed, classroom live feed provided to parents. So this was another decision taken by Delhi government in 2022. It's been taken in 2019 itself, but in 2022 it came into the practice that all the cameras has been set in the can we move to the next slide? Yeah. This no next. So are we ready for such live feed thing? The live feed of the classroom are provided to parents. This was the decision taken by the Delhi government. So when I interacted with the teachers and the principals, so they shared very important points that our Indian society is not ready right now to accept the post-panoptic surveillance. Why? Because parents of some class or religion or caste coming to them and asking them that make sure our children or these students must not sit with the set of these students. So there is a social exclusion and discrimination thing. Then there is low interaction because many students are coming from the patriarchal background and conservative background. So low interaction between the opposite gender. So we are going for the co-education. So are we going backward or forward? Why are we sending schools to our children? So psychological impact on the mindset and behavior of the coming generation, lack of confidence, because if they are not able to interact with the opposite gender, then how they will feel confident later on in their life. So even it is the disrespect, just one more minute, disrespecting the constitutional values and the fundamental rights which we have. So next slides. So next again. So we need to set this kind of right now, if you see the three circles: surveillance in school, Indian societal stigmas, and Indian laws on technology. Right now we are at this stage, and what we have to achieve is to bring all the circles together and make it one: surveillance in school and all in one circle. So equilibrium is very important, that with the upgradation of technology, we want certain laws also, and we want that this paper tries to look into the behavior aspect also. So there were certain changes which need to be initiated to adopt the post-panoptic. So at last, I would like to just say that my whole observation was that we are neither in the panoptic setup in terms of school and not in the post-panoptic setup, but India shows a unique thing that is a mix of both. Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you, Satakshi, for this very interesting talk. And now I would request Professor Harish Wankhede for the discussion.
Nothing much from my side. I came late. I'm so sorry for that. No, of course, whenever we read, especially in our center, any discussion on philosophy of sciences, this very popular essay by Rousseau was introduced, that what is enlightenment, and that fear that probably modernity or the enlightenment thinking or science probably is not a kind of a great value for the coming civilization, and that fear and that anxiety was very much there in Rousseau's writing. And again, probably after when we read again the critiques of the positivism, again similar kind of fears were very much there, that this determinism is of course a very, very problematic concern that one has to acknowledge. And therefore probably when again in our most of our courses, when we read people like Popper, this same concern were raised, that probably this determinism is a problem, and until and unless the science is continuously in revolution, continuously in progress, or there is no stoppage of science at any level, that should be the core concern of science, and that revolution or that change or that progress will be for an ethical purpose, and therefore the concerns that are raised are crucial. And therefore what Satakshi's paper at the end, this fear that we are controlled or managed or disciplined by the science and technology, and we need to kind of think distinctively about this kind of a control and discipline is crucial. But I was also thinking that, like for that matter, Varun suggested that at least in Indian academic tradition, this engagement is somewhere lacking. It is the West that is mostly doing, of course, the scientific advancement and also literature on that, and also building some kind of a relationship with what kind of society we should imagine in the future. So that discipline and that whole school of thought is available in the West, and probably we are learning and somewhere mimicking that part of what West is doing. And therefore I was just thinking that West is not only doing it in a very interesting academic manner, but even in the public discourse, for that matter, if you see the literature and cinema, if you see both the planes, you'll find that the way the interactions are going on, like for that matter, even a very populist novel of Michael Crichton, like Jurassic Park. If you read those kind of novels, you'll find that the kind of imagination they are suggesting and the fears and anxiety that they are portraying in their novels is very much visible, that we are basically moving towards a very difficult and dangerous time. And while suggesting that, they also have this kind of what everybody was suggesting, that some kind of an ethical imperative that we need to stop it, we need to somewhere stall it and create a system which will be beneficial for the human values or humanity in general. And therefore probably I think not only from the academic disciplines which are there very much, but from the popular culture like cinema. I was just thinking that when Satakshi was suggesting that we need to do such an important field work for that, this Debakar Banerjee's very popular film Love, Sex and Dhoka, it is basically basically about camera, that every part of our life is determined by camera. You cannot simply escape camera, these two cameras for that matter. So everywhere, means without that exposure to the lenses, you cannot imagine your life today. And therefore this discipline and control is almost omnipresent. You cannot simply, it is almost like God. So you cannot escape, and Google or these meta companies are actually doing that, and they are basically making you subject of their technological order. So this feeling is very much there in cinema, in literature particularly, and probably the academic world, mainly South Asian academic world, is somewhere distant from that, and therefore probably we are still engaging with very introductory note on this particular discussion, society and technology. As I said, that for that matter, again giving examples from cinema, these three important films, Lucy, where the idea of quantum physics, as I said, that she develops her mind in such a fascinating manner at the end that she is able to control all the machines available at her disposal. That power of her mind is shown in that film. Or Player One, Spielberg's very popular film. It's a futuristic film where you can imagine that the world is collapsing and everything is controlled by machines, and you are just a player in that big mechanism. Or even for that matter, Avatar, the second part. It is an ethical film that we are not only destroying Earth, but we are also colonizing the new planets and basically destroying that, and therefore the problems of science.
The
Matrix, of course. There are wonderful expositions are there in literature and science, and therefore probably learning from those, and probably in India, when somebody was suggesting determinism and the relationship of the Indian intellectual thought, probably very recent film Kalki. It is very deterministic film. It has nothing to do with what you call the call for intellectual ability. It is suggested that when the world is about to collapse, when world is already collapsed, there will be an avatar. There will be a prophet. There will be a savior who will come and change the world discourse. And probably in all religious thought, that determinism is very much there. It is more than what you call the application of mind to change the world. It is basically the weight of the prophet. That possibility is, of course, very much there. And probably the Indian science or social sciences or this whole concern about ethical persuasion is almost deterministic, and probably science hardly respect that. Science technology doesn't mean, for science and technology, the ethical parameter doesn't mean anything. It appears like an utilitarian concept, and if you force an utilitarian approach to deal with science and technology, it will not able to function. And therefore that dialogue is a very, very difficult dialogue. I absolutely learned a lot from today's discussion. I thought I just this stray thoughts today to deliver. Thank you very much for asking me to speak.
So thank you, Professor Harish, for such a wonderful discussion. I would like to add a few points, and then I will open the floor for the questions. Building upon the Satakshi's work, I would say that I and Sudip were working in this direction in algorithmic biases, because we are monitored continuously. We have free Android, so every tech is being sold and we have a lot of data, and then we have algorithmic biases. So because of that, there was some push from the public side, and then later on, after much resistance, Google accepted that framework, and then we have California based ruling, which is like preservation of our data with some ethical standard. Then we have another European framework, because otherwise it was very much biased. I mean, earlier in 2015, if you used to search doctor in Google, you are likely to see an image of a doctor, male and white. Nowadays, algorithms are being improved. So now, after this improvement, things are better, but not much better, because I would say they can identify skyscraper, motorcycle, bikes, but not identify between a gorilla and an African man. So these are the biases that still needs to be corrected. With those words, just two more words. One is misinformation and another is disinformation. Misinformation is like any information that is missing or incomplete information, but disinformation is when you are manipulated. Okay, so your consciousness is being manipulated and in favor of digital populism. So it is again a mean, and it sets again a positive feedback loop and negative as well, depending upon the path that you are choosing. Okay, so well, with this I would end and I will open the floor for the questions. So let's have some questions.
With our Shastras, it was rejected by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, as you all know. So when we talk about consciousness here, and we talk about the anti-caste traditions that comes from Phule, Periyar, Ambedkar, Savitribai, everybody. So they talk about these also text as unscientific, right? So then this is the contradiction that I'm trying to understand. Like quantum scientific, the Indian tradition unscientific. And then we are also talking about consciousness here. Whose consciousness are we talking about? The Ati Shudras or the ex-untouchables or depressed classes that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar talked about, the Shudras that we are talking about here. They were not given the choice or the opportunity, to get education. So whose consciousness are we talking about here? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Irfan and I am doing a PhD from the Center for Political Studies, JNU. I have two questions, both to my great friends Varun and Rakesh. One has to do with the question of ethics and Indian intellectual tradition, and second has to do with the technology and Indian intellectual traditions. To begin with the first one, your title mentions ethics as conceptual, category. Ethics by itself takes into consideration the question of good life. What's good life, or what Aristotle would call human flourishing? Could you elaborate more on the constituent components of good life as conceptualized in Indian knowledge system or Indian intellectual tradition? And what makes that conceptualizing of good life or human flourishing exceptional, against the available, other available knowledge traditions in the world? One question. Second has to do with technology and Indian intellectual tradition. When Greeks were conceptualizing about technology, for example, Aristotle and Plato, both were disinterested in domestic life. So they thought that crafts and techniques are not worthy of philosophical, philosophical conceptualization. Is the story similar in Indian intellectual tradition, where the philosophers of the ancient Indian intellectual tradition disinterested in domestic life? Is the story similar or it's a different story? Yeah, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hello, I'm audible. So my question is open to the panel and anyone can answer. So my name is Sudip Patra. I'm a research scholar in JNU. So I see that it is a regular phenomenon in Indian intellectual tradition. I mean, what we say that we are witnessing that whenever there is some sort of scientific discovery happens in West, we try to compare it with what is there in our ancient text like Vedas and Upanishads. And why it's not the reverse, that we find something in our Vedas and Upanishads and then we build something practical on that. Like we build a functional quantum computer from the principles that we have derived in from Vedas and Upanishads. So it doesn't happen, and in that way, the problem is that just like you cannot create a functional quantum computer or any quantum physics principle without having a scientific infrastructure in the West, and in the same way, you cannot justify the spiritual experiences of our ancient sages, through which they have gone through deep meditative experiences and derived these principles. So these are two basic terms on one point, that there is a materialism and spiritualism. You cannot go into these principles without having those meditative experiences. If you are talking about these experiences, I mean, you must go through the experience, then you can talk about these principles that has been written in Vedas. So I just want to ask about that. Why there is this hypocrisy in Indian intellectual tradition to find something in what is happening in the West and putting it that it is our own, it has been written 3,000 years ago.
Thank you. I am Ananta Kumar Giri from the Madras Institute of Development Studies and a friend of this creative colloquium journey. Now, in terms of the first paper, Savita and Sudip, the quantum term, now your engagement with quantum science also needs to be accompanied by the multiple conversations about quantum self and quantum society, which has been there for the last quarter century. Now this quantum term, how does it interact with multiple transformative terms? For example, as initiated by R. Sundararajan, Beyond the Crisis of European Sciences, where he's talking about three other terms, ecological, feminist, and the linguistic, to which we also need to add many other terms, including the onto-decolonial term, including the question of caste and others. This quantum engagement also is not isolated from transformation in the neurosciences. You might also know that the very fascinating discussion about neuropolitics going beyond the left and right, as initiated by William Canori. So, in terms of the feminist also, that this very idea of the feminist, all the references, Savita, how does it also engage with a fundamental rethinking of the feminine, for example, not just in terms of Ardhanarishwara, but what Ramachandra Gandhi calls as the eunuch, and kind of. Then very quickly about your papers, Manindra and our friends, about AI and the Indian intellectual traditions, along with ethics, as you are referring to the Kashmiri traditions. Also, what is the possibility of aesthetics, and then the consciousness itself. So the aesthetics of Indian intellectual traditions, ethics and aesthetics coming together in thinking about this.
Hi. Sorry, my throat is done, but a few queries. One is to Savita ji and Sudip. Is it possible to have a theory without determinism? I mean, this is one thing. Because what we are talking about, critiquing unchanging per se. And for example, Foucault suffered a lot because he was proposing critique of determinism and offering a kind of deterministic theory of power that look at the power in practice, not in the structure. So this is one thing. And second would be to Satakshi. I mean, in 2021, we were informed proudly by the Delhi government that the Delhi ranks #1 in having maximum surveillance camera, and we were proud citizen of Delhi. Do you see counter strategy by the students? Because it happens in case of panoptic and post-panoptic scenario. And third, to Manindra, Varun and Rakesh. I mean, one of the this is for my own clarity concerning Vedantic tradition. When they recognize social, but this social is idea, not social is empirical. So when we say that social is idea, social is not empirical, how to reconcile this contradiction between empirical and social in the Vedantic tradition, particularly Shaivite tradition of Vivekananda and onwards. And in this context, when we say that, I mean, this is to entire panel, when we say that the East versus West, so I'm saying that many Indian philosophical tradition or six school of Indian philosophical traditions also not free from a kind of determinism. I mean, in the end, they derive sources somehow from the Vedic traditions. So even determinism, is it possible to have non-determinism from determinism in this theoretical formulation? Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yeah, my question is for Rakesh. First of all, congratulations. I really loved the paper that Varun and Rakesh presented. So and before the question, I would like to add that specifically on this linking of Indian knowledge systems with, the notion of the third layer of ontology that you're mentioning. Deepak Chopra has done a lot of work on it. So I would like to know your take on, on Deepak, and he is a descendant. I mean, he's the pupil of a disciple of Mahesh Yogi, and has done extensive work in simplifying the Indian knowledge traditions to the Western audience, and in taking it there and in linking quantum consciousness with Advaitavad. And so how would you respond to the question that asked by him that, all in one go, you just dismiss Indian knowledge system as being unscientific? What is your take on that? I would like your take on that question. Thank you.
Well, I mean, the question that, let me start with the last question first, two questions. One about this classification of the West being scientific, or the modern West being scientific, and the Indian tradition being basically unscientific or having to do with the Vedas and the transcendent. I think the question that it has raised for us, or for me at least, is what is it to be scientific? And if I may put the question in one this thing, or the suggestion in one sentence, is that which sustains body politic and cosmos, is that scientific? Or is the problems that we are discussing today, which is moving in the direction of the destruction of body politic and cosmos, scientific? I would like us to really discuss that beyond all the details that we are going into, and how now just 1 second brief in this context, brief comment is about this question of the quantum opening up the non-deterministic or variety as opposed to certainty and so on. I think what is missing, and here I would like Rakesh to comment also on this. I think what is missing from both the deterministic model and the non-deterministic model is a concept of reflection, of sakshi, where we can stand outside and ask this first question about whether this is about, what is all this about? All this detailed technical development. Is it finally sustaining body politic and cosmos? If it is not, then I would believe that it is unscientific. Thank you.
So, yeah, so I would request that we can continue the discussion over the lunch, and yeah, so I would like to request Sudip and other speaker to answer just in one minute each. We can continue it over the lunch.
No, actually, the questions were very deep. I'd just like to mention 1 or 2 points and then leave. One point is that in the whole history of quantum physics, there has always been a tension with the last question that you raised about sakshi, about witness. So, say for example, Savita ji mentioned about wave function collapse. So that is the Copenhagen view of quantum mechanics, that when a particular measurement occurs, this measurement is nothing but a collapse of the wave function. Wave function is nothing but a description of quantum state, and it is a kind of superposition of different possibilities, and out of this only one possibility is actualized when measurement occurs. Now the whole question is that who is doing the measurement, or how this measurement is done. is there any agency in this whole process of doing measurement? Now, this has been a very thorny question in quantum physics. Now, initially, when various kind of founders like John Neumann, mainly mathematician prodigy, so he brought up the question that perhaps there is some kind of Satakshi, there is some kind of being which is outside the quantum system, which is outside the rules of quantum mechanics, which can have the potential to collapse this wave function. Now the question is whether it is a conscious entity or not, how consciousness comes in here. Later on, many people have argued for and against of that. Another great scientist, Eugene Wigner, in 1960s, he proposed a particular model where consciousness is required to collapse the wave function. Otherwise, paradoxes will create, and these paradoxes cannot be solved. Now, recently, I will always say that in whole of science, as we are seeing, that there is always a tension between determinism, non-determinism, agency or non-agency. Very recently, another framework has come up, which is known as to be cubism. It rhymes well with the art movement cubism, but actually its main form is Q-B-I-S-M. Q for quantum and bism for Bayesianism. But now they have shifted to some other thing. Now their main point is that agency is central. Their main point is that when you talk about quantum measurements or whatever you are saying, this is nothing but a kind of guidebook which an agent is using to navigate in an uncertain world. So this is a very, very interesting kind of view on quantum mechanics, where earlier views were more kind of agency has no role to play, but cubism is placing agency at the center. So this is a new beginning in quantum physics also. These are the points I would like to make.
So regarding our questions, I mean the first question was about quantum computing. It's it's a new, not very new idea, but the idea is that this idea that we are not bits. I mean, the basic information, the data information is about bits, but rather it is about qubits. Qubits follow a very different trajectory in the sense that it does not follow the laws of the classical physics, rather the quantum physics. The idea about free will, as I mentioned in our paper, is that free will is a very loaded term. It can have different meanings, and you are right. But somewhere down the line, free will is something that challenges the conventional materialistic, reductive materialistic determinism. So anything that challenges or that gives some agency to different actors can be framed as free will. And the other question is that social, Vedantic idea, social as idea, not empirical. I think that is the most important question, sir. But I feel that there is this tendency to just equate Vedanta with Shankara. Why not Narayan Guru? That's my primary point, is that and ideas, I mean, that is the whole debate in quantum mechanics, is that what is primary? Is it material? Is it idea? Or is there a they're coterminous in that sense. They are like entangled with one another. So that is the fundamental debate in philosophy of science, and it has implication in philosophy of social science. And that is primary debate within, I think, left circle Marxism also, that which one is the primary thing. So I think there is no one answer, but I feel that rather than just looking at Vedantic and whole Indic frame from just homogeneous monolithic Shankara's interpretation, we have multiple interpretations. And Narayan Guru's is a primary example in that sense. And the last is Deepak Chopra. A very important, interesting question, I would say that I don't think Deepak Chopra by any means is a quack. If you would ask my position, I don't think. He has good credentials. He was topper of AIMS.
Excellent credentials.
And he conducts consciousness conference colloquium annually, and great neuroscientists, contemporary neuroscientists, philosophers of science, philosophers of mind, they participate in that. I'm not sure about his past, but what he's doing right now, it ultimately depends on how you look at the modeling and the capital framework and all. But when it comes to knowledge part, I don't think he's problematic. So that's my answer.
Okay, so thanks for all the questions. Yes, sir.
Savita, let the panel finish then.
Yeah. So thank you for all the questions. questions were more enriching than my presentation, I guess. So the first question was asked by Avichal, and it has got three small questions. First, about the type of scientific element that you are asking. Even if we leave the different definitions of science that ma'am and others are talking about and thinking about right now, even by the standard parameters of science. First, that came with Western modality and the different parameters of observation.
You have only 1 minute to answer.
Okay, sir. Observation, and then experimentation, and then theorization, data meter. And then in terms of quantum consensus that Professor Patra was talking about, the different elements of uncertainty and non-locality, through both the parameters, Indian intellectual traditions and many other texts, especially from Upanishad, are totally scientific. As I told in my presentation, the different methods that they are talking about, the methods that you go, you observe, you experiment, and then you reach to some kind of level. Through that also, and of course, uncertainty, the element of neti and neti, that is always there. Number one. Number two, about Dr. Ambedkar. What you were saying, that he said that Upanishads are unscientific. When he introduced Hindu code bill, and he tried to give a counter-hegemonic piece to the people who were from the traditional moorings, he used precisely this argument, that even your Upanishads are talking about equality. You have yourself got those kind of texts, so why aren't you banking on them? Even in his essay Buddha and Marx, when he goes from religion of rules to religion of principles, he talks about beyond rituals and beyond these kind of traditional things, you should look up to Upanishads and all. So there are things in that. The third question that you asked about whose consciousness, I think there you are caught between the debate what angels talked about, religion of nature and religion of man. So nature created with a sense of equality, but when that is mediated by power dynamics and somebody will want to capture the narrative, then that question arrives. That one question. Second question that was asked by Irfan was about the domestic parts and all. Is Wali that or Mukti is the Wali element? I would love, Irfan, that's a good question. I would love you to read Anthony Padel's book on Gandhi's Purusharth, where Gandhi talks about the 4 different elements of Purusharth: Dharma, Earth, Kam, and Moksha. And so there are 2-3 more questions. One more question. And aesthetics of Indian intellectual tradition that one gentleman was asking. So, sir, there are good potential for aesthetics. They are already there. Professor Giri was asking. So we are having a conference on precisely this topic, aesthetics on Indian intellectual tradition. Rida Hulta ma'am is working on that. And the last, there were many questions. The question about subjectivity and objectivity and meditative experiences. Well, we will have to come out of this mindset that came with Western modality, that one size is fit for all, and same kind of experience and result will come out of that. Let there be different kind of experiential epistemology and different kind of things also come out from that. And the last question, last but not the least, basically, what Anvara ma'am, that is a very important, I guess, intervention in the sense, what kind of distance the seer is taking from both the deterministic and the non-deterministic model, and the reflective capacity and the witness that Professor Batra was talking about. So witness has the capacity. What Thakur was talking about, autonomy. So in that sense we consider. So we can talk about it.
To be colonized by it. We can have the agency to see if they have any intrinsic value. And the third one is that, we did not mention, I think it was mentioned towards the very end, the Deleuze's name, but also Bruno Latour and the guys, Deleuze and Guattari, all of them, post-humanist thinkers, have different understanding of how things operate. Nothing operates just in one way, that is through causation. It's not that something comes into being because it has been caused by something else. There is a notion of emergence which even Roy Bhaskar uses. So these are a lot of things and realities are emergent, and things have intrinsic value. They are not imputed value by anything else, anything superior. The superimposition and determinism is a part of a worldview, which is called Newtonian worldview, at least for the sake of simplification. Nothing beyond that. So feminism has benefited a lot because they were basically the outcomes of theories and consciousness of causation, and that's it. So we are not caused by masculinity. Masculinity is not caused by feminism. We are in a world where, if we rethink, we find solutions and answers.